Martin, good evening and welcome to News in Focus live on Radio Al Ansar.
Assalamu alaikum. Thank you so much for having me. It's a wonderful pleasure.
Martin, it's a pleasure having you live in the studio. I know you have a very busy portfolio and you've been in various portfolios, and I know your modus operandi is let's get the job done. Yep. When you were in council, you always questioned, why it's taking so long. How quickly can we get this matter sorted out? And it was about getting service delivery on the ground. When you became an MP and you joined me in my show, that was the same theme you had. That, listen, I've been appointed by the people and I must now deliver on the people's needs. And notwithstanding the fact that I may belong to the opposition party, I always had service delivery in mind. We are pleased to note that your party has nominated you to be appointed as MEC for KZN Public Works and Infrastructure, and the Provincial Government of National Unity recognized your experience and appointed you in that portfolio. Now, obviously, Martin, over the years, there's been a transition from being a councillor on local government, then being an MP in province, KZN province, and now a minister. So you've moved up the ranks. I want our listeners to hear it from you directly that from the time you became a councillor, some of the challenges you dealt with on service delivery, from there as an MP in province, different dynamics, but also having linkage with municipalities, and now being the MEC, and we know the enormous challenges. Perhaps you just want to run us through the different phases so that we get a kind of a synopsis of exactly what were your observations in the different phases that you have been involved with. Martin?
Thank you so much. Yeah, and I mean, people said to me the other day that being an MEC must be the hardest job I've ever done. And I said, no, being a ward councillor is actually the hardest job that exists, I think. For 8 years, I was ward councillor for Ward 27. We're actually sitting in Ward 27 right now, which is Morningside, Greyville. And in 2011, when I became a councillor, it was a different metro. Mike Sutcliffe was still the city manager. Jane Kumalo was our mayor. And it was still a functional city. So being a council was actually not that difficult, but it degenerated quite quickly from there, where a council went from representing the people to actually being a service delivery agent, a call center agent, a plumber, electrician, and doing the job that the officials are actually supposed to do. And it became a very, very tough job to do. And I really feel for my colleagues who are still in council because of that. But being a councillor has taught me the most important thing, and that is to always remember who you serve. And that you do serve. You don't, I said earlier today that I get quite upset when people talk about a ruling party. We're not a monarchy, we're a democracy. We've got a governing party. And that's what I learned being on the coal face of service delivery right there. But I also learned that there's a disconnect between the provincial government, the national government, and the local government. So the people on the ground don't necessarily see what does the provincial government do for me. So when I became an MPL, which was in 2019, I always tried to prioritize local government. I managed to convince the party to put me on the COGTA portfolio committee because I'm passionate about local government. And I served on COGTA for a long time. But the challenge there was when you're in opposition, unfortunately, South Africa is still being a maturing democracy. If members of the opposition say something, the governing party just ignores you. They don't listen, even if it's a good idea. They're just not going to do it because it comes from you. And then came the elections, last year's elections, and no one could predict what was going to happen. This tsunami that we call MKP came and made all the predictions totally wrong for KwaZulu-Natal, and the GPU was formed. Now, people should also remember that the government of provincial unity has a majority of one vote in the legislature. So we've got 41 votes on the side of government, 39 on the side of the opposition.
And that's the NFP vote.
And that's the NFP vote, which is, which
so
is also
it's
interesting.
Very fluid, and, you have to be careful.
Absolutely. So, we've got the IFP, we've got 4 members in the cabinet, ANC with 3 members, the DA with 2 members, and then the NFP with their singular member that sits on cabinet.
And the balance is the MK?
Yes, and MK is NK and EFF. EFF has 2 seats, and MK then has their 37 seats. And that's the opposition benches, just 2 parties. And I learned very quickly, opposition is easy, government is hard. I accidentally came across a speech I wrote in 2019 when I served on a Public Works Portfolio Committee. And the speech said the MEC of Public Works must do A, B, C, and D. And I was looking at these things like, okay, I can't do A, I can't do B, C I can maybe do. And I realized that in government, you have a different perspective of it.
Correct.
But the same thing remains. So I serve the people of KwaZulu-Natal, and I must always remind myself of that. My office is in Mayville, not far from here. And people ask me, why is your office, if you look out of the window, you see one of the worst informal settlements, and which is
Cato Manor, yes. And that's where all the muggings take place, and the smash and grabs.
Absolutely. And people ask me, why don't you move your office? I say, because when I'm here, I'm reminded whose life I'm supposed to improve. So every time I look out of my window, I'm reminded, but these are the people whose lives I'm supposed to improve. That's my job. And in public works, my motto is, well, two things. One is let's build KZN better. But the second one is I manage all properties of the province, falls on me. That's 10,800 properties across the province, buildings, open land, schools, clinics. And I have a motto that if it belongs to the public, it must serve the public. Right. And that's what we've been doing for the last year and 2 months.
Now, Martin, obviously, when you became MEC, like any efficient MEC or leader, you obviously got to look at the status of infrastructure. Over the years, there's been a deterioration. And if it belongs to province and linked to the municipality, there's an interaction of sorts, because very often municipalities require buildings and land belonging to province for development. And because I was in the housing fraternity, we used to look for buildings and land to develop housing or to put people temporary until we find alternative premises for them. So when you became MEC, you would have obviously done a status quo report. Obviously, you would have had your predecessors that would have performed at a certain level. So what was your findings or observations when you did the status quo report on the state of infrastructure in KZN? Because we're not only dealing with the Tequeni now.
So I think the first thing to also remind your listeners of is that KZN never had a department of infrastructure before. So public works was a much smaller department, just looking after the physical buildings that belongs to the government. And infrastructure was a mishmash that some department did this, other department did something else, and municipalities did their own thing, and it just wasn't working. So when the GPU was formed, it was decided to change the department into public works and infrastructure, and that we now play a overseeing and a coordination role, because some infrastructure, according to the constitution, belongs to municipalities, not the province or the national government, and so forth. But we have a power now to help and assist municipalities with that. And we know that one of the single biggest challenges, complaints people tell you is water is not running, electricity is not there, the roads are falling apart, and the sewage that flows, everywhere, and not only in Tequeni, across the province. So that's why this department was then formed. So we're not trying, but we are moving the department and repositioning itself to play that role. But one of the first things, and I've told this story quite a few times, I walked on the stage, the premier sworn me in, I walked off, and this well-dressed gentleman came to me and says, "I'm your HOD." I said, "Oh, wonderful to meet you." He says, "Yes, I have to tell you we're broke." And that was a great start to my day and to the year ahead. Then one of the first things I said is, we need to do an audit of what do we own. And I remember the officials were very upset with me. They said, "How can you say that we don't know what we own?" I said, "Well, then the audit will be quick if you know what we own." The audit just finished, and those officials came to me and says, "MEC, you're actually right. We discovered hundreds of properties that the government didn't even know it owned. That plays a direct role also in infrastructure." The third thing was that we had to tackle the matter of the construction mafia, or the extortioners, however you want to call them. And we took a very, very strong stance on that. And then we looked at infrastructure itself, and we said that the problem with municipalities, and especially our rural municipalities, is they just don't have the capability. They don't have the experts. So they have to pay millions and millions to consultants who sit in Joburg and Cape Town, come in for a few hours, charge you R1 million and fly back. So we've now just signed our MOU with COCTA, so that our Office of Experts, so we have all the engineers, all the architects, all of them within the department, we will now be assisting these municipalities. And we're going to tell, okay, you need to build a new water line, we will send the engineers to do the work for you, no cost. So the municipalities will be saving millions. Because we are saying that while there are three spheres of government, we're still one country, and we have to work as such.
Now, Martin, when you all did this audit, and with the audit, you probably had an assessment of the state of the infrastructure. Like the HOD mentioned, we broke, and he obviously maybe thought he'll scare you because now you got no money. How are you going to do the job?
He's also suspended now.
So obviously he may have realized, and that's what happens in all municipalities from many of our observations, is that the first thing they look at is the budget and how can I basically use this budget to create maladministration, because that seems to be the thinking in a lot of municipalities and provinces.
Yeah.
So when you did the audit and you then established the state of those buildings and the infrastructure and the work that is required, which can then lend itself or lead to the budget, what were your findings? Because I read a lot of reports when you started, is then you picked up what we're now talking about. The monies were not spent correctly, and that is a criminal offense, and it's not really something that we can allow. Because if 50% of your budget is spent on maladministration and corruption, then people are not getting value for money, for the rates and taxes they pay, and it's a major problem. So what were your observations, Martin? Because I know it's still early years in your portfolio, but you were not afraid to pick this up and talk about it.
Let me give you a very, very simple example. Before we saw in the GPU, and just after the election, I was in MPL, I was in the legislature, and one of the urinals in the male toilet broke. 2 weeks later, I was the MEC for Public Works, and I saw someone was there fixing it. So I said, this is a good way for me to understand how does this process work, because we manage that building. So I asked the HOD, and he explained to me, we don't have any of our own plumbers anymore. All those posts are vacant, so we have to tender it out. So I asked what was wrong with the toilet. It was clogged, so it just needed to be unblocked. It cost us 10,700 Rand to unclog a toilet. Now, that's ridiculous. Shouldn't be charging. It should be.
If you get somebody internally, you can do it with a couple of hundred.
Yes. So then when I dug, I realized they didn't want to fill those posts of plumbers, of electricians and everything, because then I can tender it out, and my friend is getting the tender, and I'm getting the kickback as the official. So it's that type of, even on the most simplest of levels, those are the type of things that we had to deal with. We found officials that had 4 cell phones paid for by the department. Now, why would an official need 4 cell phones? You need 1 cell phone. So we just started with that first. Cut back the waste so that the money goes where it's supposed to go.
Yes.
On the infrastructure, we also realized that because no one was playing an overseeing role, that it was a mishmash. So everybody was doing their little bit, and it wasn't talking to each other, wasn't connecting. So that's where we're busy with now. And I'll give you another good example. Renewable energy. KZN doesn't have renewable energy. Yet we are a province that is perfectly situated for it. Newcastle is great for solar power. Richards Bay and Klatuze is great for wind power, for instance. But we haven't moved forward because it was left to various different departments to do. And now, as public infrastructure, we're saying, no, let us now oversee this and move forward on this, because we want to foresee, and I know I get in trouble as a DA member for bringing up the Western Cape, but if we have load shedding, if we're all on stage 4, the Western Cape's only on stage 2 because they have renewable energy. They can take that hit, and we're supposed to do the same. And then the last thing about the properties is I said that we must look at which properties are underutilized and unutilized. And we own, in Durban, you mentioned about buildings for human settlements. In Durban, there's an old hotel that belonged to this department, the Palm Beach Hotel on the beachfront. Now, why would the Department of Public Works and Infrastructure own an empty hotel? We then negotiated. eThekwini took that building over, and that's going to be a temporary housing facility for people in storms, when floods hit, and that building is going to be used for that. We've just put 88 properties on the market, but I also must qualify this. That doesn't mean we're taking the highest bidder. We're saying to communities, come with a proposal. So let's say an organization like yours says, we want to build a women's shelter on this piece of land that belongs to Public Works in the market. So you're not offering us the same amount as someone who wants to build a apartment block there, but we're going to say, no, this community actually needs a women's shelter. So we're going to take your offer, not the one that's R1 million more, because it must serve the public. And that's the type of things that we're now looking at making sure that every property, we just signed an MOU with agriculture, that all our empty pieces of land will become food gardens until we need them for something else, because it must serve the public.
Now, Martin, in terms of your findings on the state of the infrastructure, you mentioned, the water infrastructure is shot, the sewer infrastructure is shot, and now these are all municipal functions.
Yeah.
Now, you're correct in saying that the relationship between national, provincial, and local government has to be effective, because when we were in human settlements, I know very often that to approach province, the Minister of sort of infrastructure or public works, it was a mission to get the building allocated. Sometimes it takes 2 years, and but then your requirement has been exhausted.
Yeah.
Your HOD then, who is now suspended, indicated he's broke. You obviously would have contacted Treasury to find out what funding you have and how do I deal with these challenges? Perhaps you just want to give us an input as to how are you managing now that, and what's the reality on the ground?
Yeah. So we just approved last week or 2 weeks ago, the budgets were a bit delayed. So we just approved our budget. Public Works has a very small budget, only 2.3 billion. I know it doesn't sound small, but compared to other departments, it's the second smallest of all the budgets. But we have an interesting system of working, and I think that's also systemically a failure, that the infrastructure budget still goes to all the other departments. So to build new schools, to give you an example, that budget goes to the Department of Education, and then they pay us to do it. So there's a bit of a disconnect in that. And same with municipalities, that the budgets go to them, the grants go to them, and then we can come in and assist them. So the budget, our budget, is just really to run the department and to make sure we can provide these services to the others. But the fact of the matter is, we sit with a municipality like eThekwini that sent back large amounts of grant money to the national government. They're not spending the money they get. Storm damage money, the disaster management money, they had to send it back. Now, if the sewage is still running into the ocean 4 years after the storm, and you didn't spend that money, how can you justify that to the people? And that's where we're now going to come in as provincial government and say, let's help you as a municipality. You're getting 5 million rand or 5 billion rand or whatever the case might be. You're struggling to spend it for whatever reason. We will help you spend it on what it's supposed to be spent. And that is fixing the infrastructure. Water is also one that I feel very strongly about, because currently water falls as the mandate of the national government, the Department of Water Affairs, and your district municipalities or your metro. So the province is totally skipped. We have no official role to play in water infrastructure. And we're saying, but that's a failure, because you can't have Pretoria decide on the water needs of KwaZulu-Natal, because our water needs is not the needs of Gauteng, of Western Cape, of Northern Cape, or Northwest Province. So they have to give the provinces a bit more of a role there. And I know I'm from a party that believes in federalism, and I'm a federalist myself, but I do think that the country have to really look and say some of these mandates have to be given to the provinces to play that role. We have to give a water plan and then say, all right, let's make sure the bulk water goes where it goes. And I was in Jozini last week, and you have this beautiful dam, and the community right next to the dam wall has no water, haven't had water for 28 years. Now, how can you live next to a huge dam and not have water? That's a failure of government, and we have to answer for that. But because the province is not managing the water infrastructure, that's why it's happening.
Martin, in terms of, you have a government of national unity, you have a provincial of national unity, there could be some linkages with the current municipality, maybe not as close as these two spheres of government. Perhaps if you just want to indicate, I know last week we briefly spoke, the president says that, as far as he is concerned, the GNU is gaining momentum. There are differences amongst the participants, but they're beginning to reach common ground. In terms of province, you have the IFP, you have the DA, you have the ANC, and you have the NFP as one of the smaller parties, and then you have the opposition of MK, who are the majority, and EFF. How is your relationship and cohesion like national? Are you all gaining ground? Do you all have a united force that's working together with one vision? For the benefit of our listeners, because many times you get people saying, but the GNU is a waste of time, the PGNU is a waste of time. Will this prevail in the municipalities? It's likely. So how do you see it at the moment? Are you all looking at the interests of the province, the country? Are you all working in unity? Party politics are kept aside? You're prepared to raise the issue with other colleagues if there are areas of concern. Perhaps you just want to enlighten our listeners.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's important to also know that the GPU and GNU was two separate negotiations, and the one is not dependent on the other. So if the GNU, for whatever reason, does fail, the GPU will continue, because it's not linked to one another. The one can stand alone. And the GNU is having many challenges for different reasons. And I'm not in the GNU, so I can't comment too much on that. But in the GPU, we've been a stable government for a year and 2 months now. We've had no serious crisis that almost brought the provincial government to its knees. Some people say we're currently in a crisis because of some allegations against 2 MECs, but even that, I think we are still working well together. And it was a change for us all. The Honourable MEC for Human Settlement, Honourable Duma, and I used to clash vehemently in the legislature. We were sparring partners. We were always in the same debates. And now we're sitting in the same cabinet. And you have to change your mindset to do that. And we both did that. And you remember, as I said earlier today, the hardest part of opposition is you come with good suggestions, no one listens to you. Now in a cabinet, I come with a good suggestion and they listen. And they say, well, that's actually a good idea, even though it's a dear idea because we won government. And there's some ideas
You're working as a team, as a cohesive team.
And cabinet meetings can be very robust. We'll have our disagreements. But, I always say that I firmly believe the majority of political parties in this country want to get to the same destination. We just differ in the road to get there, but we still have the same thing in mind that we want to do. And there are more, and this is true for all South Africans, there are more that bind us together than that to divide us. And even between political parties, yes, the IFP and us have our differences. They're more to the right than us. We in the ANC, our differences are well known. We've been fighting each other for a very long time. But I think the reason the GPU stands stronger than the GNU is a couple of reasons. One is we're only 4 parties. The GNU is a lot more parties. And I think it's a lot harder to manage it when you have 8 or 10 parties in a coalition than when you have only 4 parties in a coalition. The second reason is that because there's a strong opposition in this province with MKP, and these 4 parties feel very strongly that that party has to be kept out of government. So I think, sometimes enemies make the best friends. So I think that is also uniting these 4 parties in that. I jokingly yesterday I told someone that, MKP currently now is on its 9th chief whip in 1 year in the legislature. So I said, if they were in government, we'll probably already be in our 7th premier. Because the instability that exists in the MKP. So no, the GP is very stable. I think we're also lucky in that Premier Ntuli from the IFP, he's a very calm person. He's a person that listens, gets all the ideas, and then move forward. So I do think we are finding each other, and there will be hiccups. It's never going to be smooth. Coalition government is hard, but I personally believe coalition is the purest form of democracy, because then you have checks and balances even within your government. And you get that differing of ideas. And our national motto is strengthen our diversity. And that's exactly what a coalition is.
So now, just before I ask my colleague to come in, you're 1 year, 2 months in office.
Yeah.
The achievements you've made and what you envisage going forward. Perhaps if you can just sum up, Martin.
Yeah, no, I'll try and do that very quickly. I've spoken about the properties and the audit that we've done. We have managed to unblock 58 projects that were stalled. We've unblocked them, and they're now going to completion. And
they were unblocked for what reasons, Martin?
Some of them were non-payment. Some of them were construction mafia. Some of them were just contractors not performing. So So what we did is we formed a rapid response team that meets weekly. That immediately, if there's a blockage, looks at what it is and unblocked this. And some of it was just bureaucracy that we've just took the red tape away and said, let's make all this a lot quicker. On the contractors, when I came in, the department owed over almost 600 million to contractors. Some of these contractors haven't been paid in 5 years. And a contractor is not paid is a child that doesn't eat at night. We've managed to pay up to 550 million rand of that as of last week. And most of our contractors now being paid within 30 days. And I'm very proud of that fact. And then something we announced last week is we've made deals with MTN, and we're also in talks with Vodacom currently, because of connectivity is a big problem in rural areas. If you go to a clinic, the clinic can't phone an ambulance to come fetch a sick patient. You can't phone your police station. Kids at school can't access the internet. So we've just released 8 of our properties in the Umkhanyakude district, which is the most rural of the districts in KZN, right on the border with Mozambique and Swaziland. And we've negotiated for 12 more properties from the national government. So 20 new cell phone towers is going up in these deeply rural areas, so that they will have connectivity. So we are leveraging what we have, and we're saying to these companies, use our properties for free, but please make sure that our rural areas have connectivity, because it's important for us to do so. So if I have to sum up the 4 most important things, I think those are the ones I would focus on.
No, thanks very much, Martin. Before I let you go, my colleague Sam Kennedy is present. He joins me from time to time as a political analyst. I'm going to give him an opportunity to...
He was here when I was here last time as well. So.
raise one comment or question, but be brief, because... I don't want to take more than what I've allocated to Martin, because next time you won't come here. So, Sam, here you are. Please, you want to make a comment or a quick question to Martin?
Yeah, look, I think Martin. Firstly, it would be appropriate to say congratulations on your political achievement or political progress. 2, I think. Looking at what you've been doing, particularly yourself, at provincial level, I think the department is a bit more slick I think it was too bureaucratic. And I think it was too politically partial. And so the myth that everybody's anti-DA, that's not true. So let's put you at ease there. However, and it's part of my role. I also do op-eds for community newsletters, and I'm talking to 40,000 people at a time. And those people are telling me, look, these are the questions that if you're sitting down with Martin, you need to ask these questions. Firstly, in Phoenix and Tongaat, we Chatsworth I'm not fully appraised of, but I know there's challenges there. We have serious water reticulation problems. Your chair was also the minister, the National Minister of Public Works. So you have the National Minister of Public Works, who is the chairman of KZN, the Deputy Minister of Public, the MEC of Public Works, who's the Deputy Chairperson of the DA. So you have that link. Dean goes to Phoenix and propositions a whole lot of rhetoric, political rhetoric, and nothing happens during a by-election. And then something else happens, and I think it was 2 weeks ago, he was there again. And for me, this is where I see the disjuncture. I know Martin. I mean, I've had a debate with Martin. We disagree on a number of issues, but it's cordial, it's professional. Where we agree, we support. And like I said, I think his department.
So your concern is the disconnect you want Martin to.
I want the disconnect. I'm saying the disconnect is the people of Phoenix need you. They don't want Dean McPherson. You, the link of this province. We don't want political rhetoric from a national minister who's pushing out newsletters and saying, this is what we're doing, this is what I'm doing. No. We have, whether we agree or disagree with the PNU or PGU, we want to see Martin Meyer, right? He's our link. He's an Italian, he's a KZN boy, although Dean is. We want Martin, you also Deputy Chair, get involved. Say to the people of Phoenix, yes, I understand. I'll facilitate it. You have the contacts. You have that leverage where you can pick up the phone and say to the mayor through Tula Sizwe or whoever at provincial level, listen, guys, we definitely got a problem in Tongaat and we definitely got a problem in... Let me tell you, Eunice, the problem in Tongaat with water is catastrophic. Tongaat haven't had water since the floods, 3 years. The problems in Phoenix are chaotic, right? And without putting a political hat where people pop up just for by-elections, let's deal with the issue. And that's all we're saying.
Samuel, let's give Martin an opportunity. Martin?
So let me say on Phoenix, for instance, and I said earlier that, you know, we are now as a department trying to play an oversight role and a support role to municipalities, because the water still falls under the metro, not the provincial government, but we have a role to play and we know more.
Agreed.
That. And we have a MOU with eThekwini that we signed and that Minister McPherson also signed. So the two of us sat together, and I have a lot of respect for Meyer Kaba as well. I think there's a lot of problems in the city, but I think it can be fixed. So in Phoenix, I'll give you one example that our department has done. Councillor Samir Singh came to us and said, listen, there's money available. It's the block sum money. I don't know what they call them, but I used to call them block sum money. Correct. That every councillor had some leeway into using their wards. And he wants to sink 5 boreholes. But the best place to sink them is the schools that falls under my Department of Public Works. We fast-tracked that. We managed to do that and said, yes, we're willing to work with you, make it available, as long as not only the school benefits, the community around must also be able to benefit. So it's going to be positioned in such a place, the tap is there, so when there's a water outage. Now, I know that's not the long-term solution, but long-term solution is called long-term for a reason. We also have to look at short-term and medium-term solutions. So that's one example where local government and provincial government can come together, work together, and come up with a very real solution that assists people. But we are still politicians. And politicians will do what politicians do. Politicians will talk. Politicians will come.
And we political analysts, and that's
you have to
we
analyze what
disagree.
you say. Yes, so we're all playing our role as we're supposed to do. And Dean has done a lot of good things, on a national level as well. The IDT crisis that we're seeing now, he's done. And Dean won't even get angry at me for saying that Dean and I have very different styles of working, very different. But his style works for what he needs to do. My style works for what I need to do. And I have a lot of respect. I mean, Dean and I used to be councillors together. He was Durban North and I was in Morningside. Durban North, by the way, John Steenhuisen was a councillor in Durban North. He's now the leader of the party. Dean was a councillor in Durban North. He's now a minister. And Nicole Bowman was then, and she's now a member of parliament.
That's during our reign of office.
Yes.
I was there. I know these guys.
And in KZN, it's especially blessed because the Deputy Minister of Public Works is Sihle Sigalala, is also from KZN. So KZN has a lot of good representation there. So I agree with you, more needs to be done. And I agree with you. And it's not only Phoenix and Tongaat.
I just gave you two examples.
No, I agree. But I mean, where I live in the Mountain Toti, we have only water certain times of the day. It is the whole city. But it's especially bad in Phoenix and Tongaat. This problem is going on way too long. Same, for instance, in the Ugu municipality. The water crisis has been going on for 13 years.
Rain, yes.
And the problem is purely an electricity issue with cables from the Eastern Cape that for 5 years they couldn't sort out. And that's where we need to get involved. So I'm not going to say everything is perfect and hunky-dory. No, we're far from it. But it will only work if civil society takes hand with government. If the political parties also stop our bickering and just start working for what we're supposed to do. And if the communities work with us.
And you got a hotline.
There is a Premier's hotline.
Public Works. Have you got a hotline?
We do not have at this stage. We have a complaint line and we have a whistleblowing line, because that's our focus right now is our corruption issue that we have mostly sorted now. But people are more than welcome to contact my office or through emails. It's very simple to contact my office. It's all on our webpage, and we've opened up our. My problem is my staff actually complains that I'm too open. Because if I have long office hours, they have to have long office hours, unfortunately. But I'm a firm believer. I've had meetings with over 100 NPOs in the last 5 months because I believe that civil society and government must work together, even if we disagree.
Agreed.
Martin, I know we run out of time. I think you inherited a lot of these problems. You're dealing with a lot of challenges. It's a long road ahead, but you're chipping away and making the difference, dealing with maladministration, dealing with corruption. Just on a closing note, as the Al-Ansar Foundation, we've put up two boreholes in 2 schools in the last year, one in a disabled school in this ward and another one in Verulam at a cost of 260,000. Our foundation will want to work with your department to assist the indigent communities because that's our job here. And we plan to ensure that with civil society, with ratepayer associations, with the councillors, with yourselves in provincial and national government, we all work together to improve service delivery. It's not one individual's responsibility. We appreciate you attending to the challenges, addressing them urgently, but we look forward to meeting you sometime in the future, having more interviews with you, but interacting with your office because you're dealing with a very important portfolio. I thank you for joining us today, Martin. I promised you I'll keep you for 35 minutes. It'll be a very frank interview, and I've got more interviews coming up. And on another occasion, maybe I'll give you a longer time. We can chat about more important issues as you get more involved in the office setup. But I thank you for joining us. We really appreciate your hands-on approach, the fact that you came into the studio to really, explain what's happening. We appreciate it. We wish you everything of the best, and whatever support you need from us as the Al-Ansar Foundation and our linkage with ratepayer associations, we deal with them. We are ever willing because we are here to serve the people of not only KwaZulu and Natal, but all the other areas, including Msunduzi and Pietermaritzburg, where there are a lot of challenges as well. We thank you, Martin, and wish you everything of the best.
Thanks, Martin.
Thank you.